Well, while many entrepreneurs want nothing more than to chuck in their corporate job and start off on the entrepreneur's journey, it often makes more sense for them to build their business on the sly. We look at the pros and cons of going this route. We've got Finweeks' Simona Levet and Jessica Hubbard still with me at the desk, and Charles Reed-CCO at Grofin joining us. Thank you so much for your time. So it's interesting, you work with small to medium enterprises across Africa, in fact. How common is it? Give us some examples of companies that are in fact, or entrepreneurs that are in fact building their companies and still got their corporate job.
Yeah, so thank you and good afternoon to your viewers. We find in many of our markets up north that a number of the entrepreneurs that come to us have come from working environments or are still working. Often they need to do this because they're looking for finance, and in order to get that finance, most often they need to build up collateral or resources in order to access that finance. So it is very common to see those kind of trends within the businesses we deal with.
So tell us about the pros. Let's go through some of the positives of doing this.
Sure. You know, I think that the most obvious one is that you're earning an income whilst you're planning your business. Most often, a business does take longer to launch than perhaps you would think. So of course, if you have income while you're doing this, it's an advantage. As I said, you often need to build up collateral and resources, particularly if you're going to look for finance. So this gives you more time to do it. While you're working, you of course are able to continue building your experience and your track record, which is also important, particularly if you're looking to do something that's related to what you're currently in. Networking is important. Of course, you want to surround yourself with people that are passionate about the things you're passionate about and have complementary skill sets. And of course, time. You know, it's very important to give yourself time to plan appropriately. You know, many people, or certainly you don't find people planning to fail, but many people fail to plan, and you're going to battle to find successful business people who don't plan appropriately. But of course, you want to do this all in an environment where you're not taking advantage of your employer. You're still drawing a salary, so ethically you should be putting in decent value.
Your 9 hours or 8
absolutely,
hours.
Absolutely. You don't want to burn bridges when you leave.
And should you be open with your employer, or does it depend on their circumstance?
Good question. I guess it depends on your views on how it's impacting work. Look, if you're doing this after hours and weekends, that's your time. Certainly, I think you're treading a very fine line ethically if what you're looking to start to get into is related to the business that you're currently in. There's a conflict, absolutely. So certainly then you would probably want to have a conversation with your employer, or you would actually want to leave and try and do it on the best terms you can.
I think it's obviously very important that you understand what your work contract involves. So for example, if there are any intellectual property rights, if you're coming up with ideas on business time, even if you're using business infrastructure to actually run your business, you could run into serious trouble. And I think, just going back to what you said about maintaining those bridges instead of burning them, is that very often you might find that your first supplier or your first client might actually be the business that you're working with, and it's quite often good to get that buy-in so that you can actually maybe look to leverage off that relationship.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just, you know, it's such a fine line, because ultimately, as the business starts being built up and, you know, starts gaining traction, you're going to start getting phone calls from clients during the day. They're not going to keep it just to the weekend. You're going to have urgent emails to attend to. You're going to have to start chipping into time that is set aside for your normal day job.
Of course, and it probably tees us up quite nicely to talk about some of the cons of doing this, and it's how it impacts your work. So generally, if you're running and trying to start your business after hours, you're going to be tired, and you've got to get that balance right. But importantly, you know, how much of your work efforts are impacting on your ability to plan and start your business properly? If you're looking to leave what I'm assuming would be fairly secure employment to get into a more risky business world, you want to make sure your head is in the game and that you're planning appropriately. So, you know, that's one of the cons of it. You know, I guess another one would be it's going to impact on your social life and on your family life or your personal time. Starting a business takes a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of commitment. I think it was Jenna Clifford who said, if you think you're going to start a business and work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, your business will fail. And now try and juggle those kind of requirements whilst you're still employed is very difficult.
It's almost like studying and working at the same time, and it almost, you know, kind of begs the question then, do you just keep it to yourself and not tell your employer? Because I would assume that if the employer values you and they see you starting up a business to become a successful entrepreneur, they ultimately perhaps see you leaving further down the line, and why would they want to give you the go-ahead to allow you the space to ultimately leave? Why should they still be investing in you?
It's a fair point, but again, I would defer back to the comment that you want to be ethical about this, you don't want to burn bridges. If you're making a decision that's going to impact your company, because bear in mind your company think you're working away, you're accepting a salary, and on the basis of accepting that salary they're expecting a good day's work for you. You know, it's a horses for courses thing. I think it's a case by case, but certainly I would always err on the side of trying to maintain that ethical boundary.
Are there particular businesses that work very well where you can still be working and set up a business? Are there any particular examples?
Well, perhaps first to kind of think why you would want to do that. You know, if you're looking at a passive income because perhaps you want to top up your retirement, and as financial journalists you will know better than I do the challenges people have with retirement savings in, for example, South Africa. It's going to determine the nature of the business that you'd probably look to start. In our experience, one of the main reasons that businesses fail that we deal with is because the business owners aren't as involved as they should be. And there are a couple of reasons for that. They miss opportunities, they're not engaged with their customers, so the opportunities they normally would have to modify their processes, their products, their services, they miss those opportunities by and large. And on the other spectrum, you also tend to have unproductive staff, and perhaps even fraud and theft and those kind of things. So, you know, it is difficult, it's not impossible. There are certainly examples of people who run successful businesses from work. I just think it's an incredibly difficult line to tread and still give what is expected of you in your daytime job.
On that note, we'll leave it there, but of course saying you really need to weigh up the consequences of being stretched.